else who helps to make this happen. So tonight we are rounding out and ending kind of a long journey through the 59 slogans of mind training. Mind training is a Mahayana practice that came from India and traveled throughout Southeast Asia and eventually made it up to Tibet with the great teacher Atisha. Atisha from India had numerous dreams about the importance of compassion and bodhicitta on the path, and for awakening, that it couldn't be done, awakening couldn't be done without bodhicitta, without compassion. And so he had heard of a great master named Serlingpa who lived in, I think it was Indonesia, and that he had a particular special devotion to bodhicitta, which means this spirit or the heart of awakening. It's like that, you know, the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum is a very commonly recited mantra in Tibet, and it literally means jewel in the heart of the lotus, and that jewel is the bodhicitta. And the lotus is the flower that grows from the muck of cyclic existence, you could say, or this kind of challenging samsaric existence of the mud. The flower, like ourselves, can grow out of that and become a fully awakened being. And bodhicitta, or the heart of compassion, is an essential part of that. And so Atisha went to study with Serlingpa and stayed for many years, and then finally accepted the numerous invitations he had received from the king of Tibet to actually come up and teach Dharma in Tibet, because Tibet was just coming out of kind of the Dark Ages. Buddhism had gone to Tibet earlier and flourished, and then there had been, they called him an evil king. Long Dharma was an observer of the older, more indigenous religion and didn't like Buddhism, and so he tried to wipe it out of Tibet. And eventually he was assassinated and Dharma could flourish again. Yes. So politics never below or above religion, and vice versa. But so Buddhism was having a renaissance, and Atisha's teachings of Lojong, or mind training, what we're studying here, were a very important part of that. He taught the words of the Buddha, he taught the sutras, he taught all the different teachings from the great Indian masters, and this was one of the strands of his teachings that really took root in Tibet. And the author of these 7-point mind training Lojong slogans that we've been studying is named Chekawa Yeshe Dorje. And Chekawa Yeshe Dorje had heard about Atisha's teachings but never had the opportunity to study them. Chekawa in Tibet, one day he was visiting a friend in a monastery, and he saw on the bed, on his friend's bed, was an open book, and the page that he looked at that was open, it said, "Take all hardship upon yourself and give all victory to others." And that really struck him. He wanted to find out more about teachings that would teach this. It seemed so counterintuitive to him, and it was like nothing he had ever heard before. And that is one of the Lojong slogans. And so he eventually found various teachers and was able to study the Atisha's teachings on Lojong and mind training. And he consolidated the teachings and devised this text called the 7-point mind training. So tonight we are concluding this very beautiful, pithy text that's taken us about a year and a half to go through. I can't remember exactly when we started. I think it was in the spring of 2016. Yeah, so we've taken our time. So tonight we're going to do 2 slogans and then wrap it up. And the last 2 slogans are very sweet, 58 and 59. Slogan 58, and for those of you who are new tonight, these last bundle of slogans that we're studying are more like pointers on how to bring dharma or bring your practice into your daily life. So they're kind of like words of advice. It's not so much about meditation per se, but like how to be a good person in the world. And so number 58 is, don't be frivolous. Another translation is, do not be temperamental. And so, yeah, that one's nice. That's Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche. In his book, one of my new favorite commentaries to this practice is called The Intelligent Heart by Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche. I highly recommend this text. And then one of the classic commentaries that I often refer to is called The Great Path of Awakening by Jamgon Kongtrul, one of the great 19th century innovators of Dharma in Tibet. Great commentator. He was a non-sectarian scholar, practitioner who really was a part of a furthering revival of all the small little lineages that were in threat of getting lost in Tibet. He realized that they were on the brink of extinction, and he helped to bring them back. And actually, these slogans were one of those. So these are two really great resources, and I'll leave these books up here at the end of class if you want to come and take a picture or write down the titles. I recommend checking them out if you want to go further. Okay, coming back to 58, don't be frivolous. Do not be temperamental. So quite simply, this is helping us to just realize that in our life we'll experience ups and downs. And if we are frivolous or temperamental in our life, then we are kind of on a yo-yo where we're swinging back and forth in these ups and downs or highs and lows, and getting attached to certain things or overly reactive to them is what this slogan is encouraging us to avoid doing. It's not that having emotions are bad, but it is our reaction to what arises that causes further disturbance, both within ourselves, but also with the people who are around us. So, often when I was thinking about this, I was remembering I had some friends in high school. I remember years ago when I was in high school, this type of thing was quite common. People were so dramatic in high school. I have a teenager too. I have a 17-year-old daughter, and just see her friends coming over, and they're so dramatic. And sometimes it's just fun and funny, but other times it can actually cause a lot of distress and suffering if there's this kind of temperamental disposition that is probably completely suitable and appropriate for teenagers, but most of us in the room are no longer teens, right? So it's a quality of maturing beyond that reactivity as we get older that we're moving towards. But it's particularly important in relationships. If we're in relationship and one person and one or both people in the relationship is temperamental or overly reactive, it can really make it hard to work with and discuss, negotiate the challenging aspects of the relationship, right? So say you have a partner and there's something that they're doing that is hurtful towards you, and you want to talk to them about it. And if you bring it up, and they're hyper-reactive or resistant or temperamental about it, it makes it hard to then feel that you're safe in bringing this to them and working to resolve it. There's a feeling of just more recoiling inward and saying, well, I can't talk to this person about it, they're going to get upset, so I just won't say anything. Yeah. And so it's important, especially in intimate relationship, or even friendships, or parenting children relationships, teacher-student relationships, to not be overly reactive and defensive, but actually be able to have those difficult conversations without getting too bent out of shape, so that that person and yourself can feel safe in this relationship. Well, you see, this is simple common sense, right? Don't be frivolous, don't be temperamental. So in the Lojong, or these mind training teachings, we're always trying to first, when challenges arise, we're always trying to first look inside and say, okay, well, what's my role in this? How can I work through this without having to go to the other person or blame the other person or talk it out. I mean, sometimes it's totally appropriate to talk things out, but other times it's good to work with your reaction or your hurt or your pain, whatever it is that's coming up first with yourself, or if you need to talk to somebody else about it. But in this particular context of Lojong and Tonglen, which is what we did in meditation, where we were breathing in the challenging aspect of ourself first and then breathing out the remedy, then we worked with another loved one and then an enemy in the whole world. That was Tonglen that we were doing, and that's the core teaching in the Lojong slogans. So with Tonglen, as Lojong practitioners, we're thinking, okay, how can I practice Tonglen with myself right now? With my reaction, with my sadness, with my disappointment, whatever. Right away, no, I have a tool. And then, also, if that person's really pissing us off, how can I work with that, with the Tonglen? Yeah. Then go have the conversation if you have to. Also, for those of you who know Feeding Your Demons, how many people have learned the 5-step practice of feeding your demons with me or other people? Yeah, we do it on the last Wednesday of every month. And that's also a really great way to work with whatever's coming up for you personally first, before you start, splattering it all out into the world. I mean, honestly, like my husband and I, there have been times when we were first learning the Feeding Your Demons practice, this is like a decade ago or longer. I remember it was so great because there'd be moments where we'd start getting in a fight, and one of us, or maybe both of us kind of at the same time, would have the wherewithal of saying, okay, wait a minute. We're just making things worse right now because we're in reactivity mode. Why don't we just cool off, take a break? I'm going to go over here and do Feeding Your Demons practice. Hopefully you'll go do that too. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll talk about it again from a position of having nourished and worked with our own internal reactivity first, because oftentimes that's what really gets us in a bind, and it can be sloppy and cause more trouble later. As you get older, you get more tired and you don't want to have to clean up after yourself as much anymore. You want to make sure you're as conscientious as possible in your relationships so that you don't have to waste your precious time and energy cleaning it up, So that's do not be frivolous. And then, so now I'm going to hop to the last one because I'm really excited about this one. It's so fun. It's a great one to end on. Number 59. Don't expect applause. Don't expect applause. Another translation is don't expect thanks, or do not self-aggrandize. That's different. I didn't have time to look up the Tibetan. Sometimes I like to look up the Tibetan because I can see, oh, that's why the translations are different. But different translators will translate things differently. The don't expect applause is so great. That's Chogyam Trungpa's translation, because it really says so much in our culture. Don't expect applause. Do not self-aggrandize. There's an old saying by Shantideva, great wise man from India, who said, when you treat yourself to a good meal, you don't expect yourself to thank yourself. It's a wise old man. When you treat yourself to a great meal, you don't expect yourself to thank yourself. Right? The joy, the satisfaction comes from just eating the meal. You don't have to pat yourself on the back and, oh, why aren't I so wonderful? I treated myself to a great meal. So why do you think this has anything to do with don't expect applause? Should I give you a little more? Then I'll open it up. Okay, so when we start practicing Dharma, we realize, a big part of practicing Buddhism and Dharma is about becoming a better person, becoming a more whole, awake person. And so we learn that helping others is a part of that. And being of benefit in the world is a big part of that. Being kind to ourselves and others, very important. Being generous and so on. So as we doing good, practicing dharma, practicing tonglen, meditation, mindfulness, compassion, etc., all of these various qualities that we're cultivating as dharma practitioners, all of these aspects of walking the path, all of it is its own reward. It's all its own reward. So in a way, it is very much like treating yourself to a great meal. The nourishment is the reward. When we give something to somebody, rather than expect, oh, they didn't say thank you, or oh, they're not going to, oh, a month went by and they didn't send me a thank you note, or they didn't give me something in return. In a way, that kind of nullifies the goodness that happened from that action. And we kind of like poured poison on our meal. You know? So whenever we practice dharma, we must let go of any expectation of praise or reward or renown. Whenever we benefit others, we should do it with no strings attached. Otherwise, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment. This is really true. And Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche talks about this so well. He says that it's really our self-cherishing attitude, and we've talked about this a lot in this class, that one of the main reasons, or the main core cause of our suffering, is our clinging to this kind of separate sense of self. Like, it's like they call it, in modern psychology, they're talking about it a lot too, it's like the small self versus the true self, or the big self. So we reify and we think that we are this small ego. It's the ego. And as long as we're cherishing or grasping onto our own little existence as like the most important thing, we are going to suffer. And we are going to be more self-centered in our actions. And that inherently brings about more of a sense of isolation and disconnect and actions that cause and perpetuate suffering. And he says that this particular quality of self-cherishing is what does the string attaching. There's like, I'm not enough here, so I need to get it from out there feeling. Sometimes we've met people like this, probably. Maybe we're like that a little bit ourselves. You know, there are people who, there's kind of a needy quality. It's like that they're not fully comfortable within themselves, and so they're looking to find that wholeness through other people. And sometimes it's very subtle, sometimes it's very overt. But it's a large aspect of that is this quality of having strings attached. You know, I have a couple friends who are like that, where if I don't call them, then I'm not a good friend. Whereas like most of my friends are like, I know you're busy and I know you love me, and okay, maybe you didn't call me very much, but it's not a big deal, you know? Whereas it's the friends that have the strings attached, is a little bit more of that quality. And it's important to be honest about that. You know, like I recently had to have a conversation with one of those friends and say, you know, I feel that, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to be your perfect friend. You know, I'm not. I've got kids, I've got 2 businesses, I'm just way too busy. I cannot be what you need me to be, and I'm really sorry about that. And I wish I could be. But I also wish that you could be okay with that and know that I love you and accept me as I am. And that really actually brought us closer together, and it's shifting that string-attached feeling between us. So a moment of intimacy and honesty, rather than pushing us apart, actually healed something and dropped that string feeling. I just thought I'd give a personal example of like how that can be in our life. We all have these certain situations. So this habit of self-cherishing is so old. It's just been around forever, since we were like this big. I mean, if you've ever spent time around little children, you see that it's a healthy part of development, is being like, me, I want this, I want that. But then as we become more mature adults, we can start to see how certain habitual behaviors of self-cherishing are actually counterproductive. And that's what the Lojong and the Tonglen is really working with. So it's important that when you start feeling yourself perhaps doing the string attached thing, like, I'm going to give you this, so I want something in return, this attaching strings phenomenon, remember Shantideva's words about when you treat yourself to a good meal, you don't expect yourself to thank yourself. Just enjoy the nourishment of the meal. Doing good is its own reward. Being kind, giving the gift, offering your help, that in and of itself is very nourishing, and it brings about more of a sense of contentment and happiness within the person who is giving. Kindness, compassion naturally bring us peace of mind. So don't get lost in expectations, So much of the time, like when we don't get what we want, like Byron Katie really speaks of this really beautifully in her technique called the work. We really have to be honest about when we suffer. It's very often, almost always, because we are not loving what is. We're fighting reality. And so there's all sorts of interesting exercises you can do around that I think are really helpful. It's really benefited me a lot. But that has a lot to do with your expectations. Oftentimes when we're lost in expectation, we're not loving what is. We're wanting something else. We are stuck in that kind of, it's like a hungry ghost mentality too, you see. The hungry ghost is a mythological creature who it's a certain category within the hell realms in Buddhist cosmology. Yes, they have hell realms in Buddhism, in Buddhist cosmology, and the one that always stuck with me is this idea of the hungry ghost. And the hungry ghost is a miserly person, if you're miserly, you're going to be reborn in the hungry ghost realm. But you can see these realms right here. It's not like I honestly don't believe, because I haven't seen it with my own eyes, that there's actually another realm where the hungry ghosts go. I think they're actually on our planet. Meaning, you'll see what I mean when I describe these beings. They're beings who are never satisfied. Beings whose mouths are always open and wanting to consume, but the necks are as thin as a needle. And no nourishment can pass through this thin needle. Their bellies are huge and distended, and they're never satiated. So they're always wanting more, but never feeling satisfied. Does that feel familiar? In our culture, in our modern world, in our consumer economy. So don't be a hungry ghost. Try to find satisfaction within you. Meditate. I think what happens is when you meditate, you realize that all the happiness, all the wanting that you've had, and you've been going out for it, the resource is within you. But it can take time to find that. But I have to say, it's true. It's really true. It doesn't mean that you can then become a monk and be totally happy without anything or any affection or any love. That's also very important. We're relational beings. But isn't it nice to be in relationship with someone else, but you're fully whole as you are, and then they're fully whole as they are, and you're coming together out of that kind of partnership? That's really where it's at. Okay, so what do you think about all that? I want to open it up to you guys. This last one, don't expect applause. There are some ending phrases too that I want to share, but first, before we move into that, I want to just see, are there any questions, any comments about these last two? But mainly the last one, 59, don't expect applause. I kind of threw out a broad tapestry with that one. But then the core of it is, if you do something good, just enjoy that you did something good. You know, we don't have to always be validated from outside. Yes?
I feel like there's so many, I could talk for like 30 minutes. Like so many things come up on this topic.
That's why it took us a year and a half to get through 59 slogans.
Yeah, I feel like I'll try to be succinct. Two things that come up for me is I've been working on this kind of elaborate holiday gift for my mom and my brother. And it involved like setting up this special answering machine and contacting all of their close friends and family and having people call and leave a message of like love for them. And it's just been a really interesting practice opportunity to notice like wanting them to feel a certain way or wanting people to say a certain thing or feeling like freaked, like tonight, tonight's the absolute last deadline and my mom's brother like hasn't done it yet and I'm not sure if he will, and like feeling like, oh no, what if she feels this, because that's very obviously you know, like, and then it's like, anyways, but I'm grateful for the practice for me having the awareness to be like, oh, I'm gonna practice with this all the way through, no matter what happens, it's gonna be a really rich practice opportunity. And even noticing like, oh, I've been hearing all of these, like day after day as they come in, like all of these appreciations about them, and then starting to feel like, oh, I wish someone would leave an extra one for me. Like, anyway, so I've been kind of noticing my own hungry ghost. And so I think the other comment I was going to make was thinking about that hungry ghost feeling and that needy feeling, and whether it's other people or ourselves, that feeling of like wanting but not being able to let it in. Like what to do when you feel that way. I mean, I think two things that I, like when I don't feel like I have the motivation to sit with it, I don't feel like I have the capacity to do that. I think sometimes like sitting in the sun and just feeling the warmth of the sun, or like touching a tree, or going for a bike ride, like just thinking of things that help me feel nourished that don't involve kind of like grasping. But I don't know if you have any other suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, all those things can be helpful. One thing that comes to my mind as you're speaking is oftentimes that part of ourselves that wants the acknowledgement, it's totally valid. It's not like that's wrong, you know, and I don't want any of these teachings to make anybody feel like they're wrong having these types of feelings, right? And I don't get the sense that you do. But well, it's so helpful to almost like name that feeling and feel it like an aspect of ourselves, like a child aspect of ourselves, and be sweet and tender with it. Like, oh, even talking to yourself or just taking a moment and going, I totally see that you want to be acknowledged here, and I'm acknowledging you. You know, in a way, that fragmented part of ourselves that needs the acknowledgement is like a child, and then we are like the adult, you know, like the wisdom adult, and we can give that acknowledgement to that part of ourselves now, because we're no longer a child anymore, right? That can be really helpful. That's definitely a nice way. It doesn't take a long meditation practice, like you don't have to really carve out too much time. You can even just take a moment and go, oh, there you are again, I see you. Yeah, I get it. Giving you that acknowledgement. Yeah, it's true. It's you're doing a really sweet thing, you know, and it is nice to be acknowledged for those things. I know, I definitely know that story. So when you see that, just think, oh, it's just so sweet. You want to be acknowledged, I'll acknowledge you. What's funny is that once we start doing that for ourselves, then it starts being more reflected in the outer world. But you don't want to do it because of that. Okay, one or two, yeah. Go ahead.
So I noticed something that really resonated with me was the string attaching, and the not finding fulfillment in self and looking for it in others. I noticed that is actually one of the things that brought me to practice several years ago. and it's been a huge problem since. It's something that's kind of hard to focus on because there's so much complexity to practice.
Yeah.
But especially when I'm making new friends or meeting new people, I find that there's a lot of that clinginess. It's almost like there's this like polar to cling or to emotionally remove and detach.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could had any advice or anything to speak to that in terms of like new friendships, meeting new people.
Yeah.
Like I don't notice the feeling, but I know that it's there on that first interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, there's almost like a dance or a game we play, isn't it? It's kind of these habits that we have. How do we magnetize people? How do we charm people? How do we get the love that we want? I mean, these are all things that we're learning from very young ages, right? How do we get love? And not lose the love. And so through the practice, we become more self-aware, right? When we're coming off of our center. Like when you feel, like if you could feel like you're completely whole within yourself, that's your central axis. And then you can, then from there you feel when you come off of your central axis is, oh, I'm extending a little too far out this way, or I'm leaning back a little too far this way because I don't want that, or how can I come more back onto my axis and still be fully awake with the person and energized and engaging with them, but not losing my center. And I find that if that, I'm just speaking from my own, and there's one technique that one of my teachers has taught me, which is to imagine that you have about 60% of your awareness rooted in your own being when you're interacting with another, and 40%, the rest of the 40% is engaging with the person, but you have a bit more rooted inside and you don't lose that. Because when we get uprooted, then we start doing things that we might later regret, or we've given too much of ourselves, and then vice versa also. You know, if we're pushing away, it means we're in an aversion pattern where we're still playing a little game somehow. And so it's about getting honest, like, I don't want to play games anymore. Like, if you like somebody, just wear your heart on your sleeve. I think you're awesome, I like you, you know. New friends, new lover, whatever. And if they don't, fuck it. Excuse me, screw it. You know, but you've been honest, and then you move on to the next interaction. It's like that, you know, whereas what practice does is it teaches you your center, and it's so good and juicy there that you're not willing to let go, to give that up anymore. Yeah, I think there's one here first.
So, it's on this topic. So, I've been thinking about this a lot, this attachment of strings. And with it comes a need for it to be satiated, as you said, because you're constantly attaching to non-reality. So you're going away from what it actually is, and you're trying to find something that isn't.
Yeah.
But then to not do that, you need that sense of security, that center that you're just talking about.
Yeah.
But I've been trying to figure out what that center is, and also in terms of how can you cultivate self-love without also cultivating the ego? Because I've been noticing that a bit of like cultivating the ego in an attempt to find that center, but then also not wanting to cultivate the ego because that's not something you want to do. So I don't know, I'm a little confused by that.
Yeah. Well, the truth is that we have to have a healthy sense of ego before we obliterate it. The problem a lot with the Westerners is we don't have a healthy sense of ego, and then we try to obliterate it too soon. So Buddhist psychologists, people I know and have read and studied with and talked to, all the consensus is that if there's, you know, the obliteration happens, it's called spiritual bypassing, where you're just not dealing with the reality on the ground. You're just getting up and out and trying to get high, because it's like transcending the ego. But first we need to get to know the ego and have a healthy sense of who we are. And that is like what I was just speaking. What's your name?
Stephen.
Stephen. So what Stephen and I were just talking about was that, kind of how do we find our center and stay there. The first thing that came to mind when you started talking about how do you find that is, you may recall, and at least for the last month or so, I've been really focusing on the belly center. And then from there, and the intrinsic qualities of the belly are presence, stability, groundedness. And when that comes online, when the belly's, those inherent good quality, positive inherent qualities of the belly are manifesting, that is an aspect of our essential being, presence, stability. Then that can also then support the heart to come online. And what are the qualities of the heart? Openness, tenderness, love, compassion. Those are inherent qualities, intrinsic qualities of the awakened heart. And so that's an aspect of your true nature. Those things are aspects of your true nature. When the belly and the heart are online, then they support the head center to come online. A lot of us are just here up, and we don't even know what these are. What is the quality of the head center when it's fully manifesting its inherent qualities? Wakefulness, clarity, luminosity, wisdom. And that's an inherent aspect of your true nature. So all of these, when these three centers are lined up and open and operating, then you've got your central axis, And then you can be a bodhisattva. You can respond to the ugly and the beautiful and walk your path. And so having a healthy sense of self is very important, meaning I know who I am, I know what my boundaries are, I won't let you push me around or you take advantage of me, or I'm willing to give this much and I still feel okay about it. And really knowing who you are, that's very important. But at the same time, it's like holding these two opposing ideas, one in one hand and one in the other. You have, yes, the healthy sense of self, this is who I am, I'm Chandra, I'm not you, I'm not you, I'm not you, I am me, and I'm going to go home to my family tonight. I'm not going home to your family tonight. Like, I'm me. And that's important to know who I am. But the other reality is that I'm nothing. I don't inherently exist. I am not this construct of Chandra, 44 years old, living in the Bay Area. I am so much more and less than that. I'm like blow your mind. I'm like beyond. I'm a Buddha. And fully awake. There's nothing to fix, no Lojong slogans to study. It's already there. So good, healthy sense of self, and then also understanding non-self. That's what the Buddha taught, non-self. That we have all these, we have the 5 skandhas, form, feeling, karmic volition, perception, and consciousness. But those are 5 little rivers that temporarily come together for a while to create one big river that give us this illusion of self. But when you realize, you look closely and go, oh, none of those things are really the core nugget of me. There is no core nugget of me. And yet there's a knowing, there's a wakefulness, there's a presence, there's an openness, luminosity. That's our intrinsic Buddha nature, beyond space and time. So, both important, not just one. Yep. Okay. So we've got a few more minutes, and I want to finish this text because there's a certain hell realm in Buddhist cosmology for people who don't finish the text. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm totally joking. This is really beautiful, and I just want to. So I'm sorry I couldn't get to your questions. So at the end of this text, there's Cheikawa Geshe Dorje offers a few nuggets of wisdom. He says, when the 5 dark ages occur, this is the way to transform them into the path of Bodhi or enlightenment. This is the essence of the Amrita or nectar of the oral instructions, which were handed down from the tradition of the sage of Suvarnadvipa. Suvarnadvipa is also known as Serlingpa. And so I want to read a quote, I think I remember the page number, from Jamgon Kongtrul's commentary, page 45 of The Great Path of Awakening. Since the 5 kinds of decay, meaning the times we're in, the sentient beings we are and surrounded by, our life, our emotions, and our outlook are steadily advancing. Meaning, so happy situations conducive to dharma are few, and disruptive and adverse conditions proliferate. So this is classic teaching within both Hinduism and Buddhism, is that we're actually in an era called the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga is a degenerate time. It's meaning like the Buddha appeared 2,500 years ago, and that was really great, and then it's been going downhill ever since. And Kali is an interesting word. It's Sanskrit, and you may know of the goddess Kali, but that's not Kali. That's not the Kali they talk about when they say Kali Yuga. I have a friend who's a Sanskritist, and I asked him about this, and the particular word Kali that's used within this Kali Yuga, or degenerate time, it refers to actually a very ancient gambling game in India of dice. And if you rolled the number 1, the 1 dot, that means you lose everything. That dot, that one face of the dice, is called Kali. Isn't that interesting? So it's like we're losing the game. We've got the bad roll. And we're in a degenerate time. So they're saying these kind of circumstances are decaying, and practicing dharma is actually not that easy to do during this time. While the remedies in other teachings may not be effective, for someone who uses mind training, Lojong, virtuous activity increases directly with the proliferation of adverse conditions, just as the flames of a fire become stronger and stronger as more and more wood is piled on. So meaning, for the Lojong practitioner, bring on the adverse conditions. Roll the dice, put me in the Kali Yuga, because it just gives me more fuel for my practice. So we've been talking about this. We're not turning away and trying to make the perfect life over here in some heaven realm. We're actually going in to the fire and seeing how we can grow in the face of that and be of benefit. This teaching has a special feature that others lack. It changes all disturbing emotions and adverse conditions into the way of awakening. These instructions are like the essence of an elixir and will enrich the course of experience and be helpful to everyone, whatever his or her capabilities. They are profound teachings transmitted from Lord Serlingpa, the very kindest of Lord Atisha's 3 principal gurus or teachers. So really, like if I were to my hope for you all, and me included, is that you'll remember these slogans in your daily life and that you'll apply them again and again until they become a part of who you are. Don't expect applause. Reality is dreamlike, When adversity arises, transform everything into the path of enlightenment. These are all one-liner slogans that if you've learned them and contemplated them and memorized at least a few of your favorites, they'll come back in your life and help you move through challenging situations. So a common question that I get in settings like this is, how do I integrate my practice and these teachings into my daily life? And my answer here would be, integrate the slogans, learn some of them by heart, and then remember them, recall them when a challenging situation arises. And you'll see that when you are confronted with a challenging situation, the growth really happens when you start reacting to it in a new way, informed by teachings such as these. So especially the practice of Tonglen, which is a real heartfelt practice of the sending and the receiving with the breath. When the Tonglen becomes second nature, our life really begins to change. And in a way, as we're really practicing the Tonglen and bringing these teachings into our life, the path unfolds more easily before us. So it's really important. So that's my heartfelt wish for all of you, even if tonight's your first night, like any little nugget that you've received, let it echo in your experience and see if somehow you can begin to integrate it more and more in your own life. And then lastly, Having awakened the karma of previous training and being urged on by intense dedication, I disregarded misfortune and slander and received oral instruction on taming ego fixation or ego clinging. Self-cherishing is another way to say it. Now, even at death, I will have no regrets. So these are Chekawa Yeshe Dorje's final words. He's saying basically, as soon as he saw that one-liner on the friend's bed, it lit something in him and he sought to learn more about it with intense dedication. He disregarded misfortune and slander, meaning he didn't care what people thought of him. He studied wholeheartedly and received oral instructions on taming his clinging onto this small sense of self and opening up to a greater sense of compassion and understanding towards others. And so now, even at death, I will have no regrets. Isn't that nice? Live your life in a way that you could say that on your deathbed. You have no regrets. The year to live is a great way to integrate that. This course with Vinny is a fabulous course that really you integrating all of these practices is a real juicy way to live your last year on this earth. It really shows you what's important in your life. So we are at time, and I just want to extend my gratitude and my enthusiasm for you and your practice, and I hope in some way this year I have helped to bring more peace and understanding and wisdom in your life. And let's continue. 2018, here we come. Thank God 2017's over, man. That was a really hard year. I'm hoping 2018 is a little easier, but hey, I mean, as a Lojong practitioner, bring it on. Bring it on. Not good. One of my first lamas I studied with, he's a monk from Eastern Tibet. We'd say, "Oh, how was your meal? How were you today?" And all he'd say is, "Not good, not bad." "Oh, did you like this movie? What do you think of that book?" "Not good, not bad." So it's kind of like that, moving through your life, just fully awake, but also even-keeled. So, thank you, everybody. Let's drop in. Just close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and let's take a moment to extend our heartfelt wish that any positive energy we've cultivated as a Sangha, through our practice, our study, bring great benefit for ourselves and for others, near and far.